Hey awesome fans, me Megashark, and today I'm doing the SCPs from Dr. Bob, so let's get to it.
In blissful sleep, blood
This
begins
one
to
is
leak
the
out of the
best
woman's
one.
mouth. Her teeth, they're moving,
Ew,
slithering out of the holes in her
ew.
gums.
Why?
Is
Why?
something pulling them out?
What?
Or are they just breaking free? It was supposed
Oh
to
my
be a sunny
goodness.
Saturday afternoon,
They're
warm
alive.
and mild, without so much as a cloud in the sky. Instead, a storm rolled in, turning the
Yeah,
sky
this is
gray
not
and
good.
thick with dark clouds that drenched the town in a torrent of rain. So the young woman had to scrap her beach plans, and now she's driving through the rain, looking for a way to salvage her day out. What's a good indoor activity? She could go to the library, pick out a book to read, but she can do that any day.
What
This was
about
supposed to be a
going to
special day,
theater?
a little treat after a particularly stressful week at work. As if to answer her silent plea for a rainy day activity, she spots the marquee on the neighborhood movie theater, a special screening of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Not only is catching a movie the perfect way to wait out the rain, they just so happen to be screening one of her childhood favorites. A warm rush of nostalgia washes over her, and she pulls into the parking lot. The screening starts at 2 o'clock, and right now it's 1:50. Perfect. Things are definitely looking up. She parks her car and pushes open the door to the theater. When she crosses the threshold, she's transported from the dreary, rainy day outside to a paradise of sweet treats.
Yeah, it is.
The theater went all out with their decorations for the special screening, and it really shows. Massive rainbow lollipops brush the ceiling. There's a balloon arch made to look like it's made of gobstoppers, and they've put up a chocolate fountain next to the popcorn machine. Of course they would have chocolate. What kind of Willy Wonka event leaves out the chocolate? The woman steps up to the counter, where a cheerful worker dressed as an Oompa Loompa greets her. She's already here. Why not treat herself a little bit? She purchases a ticket, along with some popcorn, some jelly beans, a large lemonade, and a big bar of chocolate. The day is really starting to turn around. The movie is just as delightful as she remembered, a mix of whimsy and dark comedy, and the accompanying treats make it even better. As she picks a bit of jelly bean out of her teeth, she feels a slight twinge, a dull ache. Better remember to floss later. She really doesn't need a cavity right now. After the movie concludes, she tosses the remains of her cinematic feast into the garbage and heads home. The rain has stopped, and the sun is peeking out from between the clouds again. It was a lovely afternoon at the movies, the perfect way to save the day from being ruined by the storm. The woman doesn't think about it much more than that for the rest of the weekend, but when she wakes up on Monday morning, something feels off. The toothache she felt a twinge of at the movie theater has gotten worse. By the middle of the week, at least 6 of her teeth are throbbing constantly. Pain medication helps reduce the pain a bit, but the feeling of pressure inside the teeth persists and is distractingly uncomfortable. She calls her dentist to make an appointment, but they can't see her until next week. For now, she'll just have to deal with it, no matter how terrible it feels. The rest of the week passes in a blur of dental distress, and on Friday night, as she brushes her aching teeth, the woman notices something troubling. One of her front canines looks cracked. How did she break it? She hasn't eaten anything hard this week. She's been treating her teeth with the utmost care. But a closer inspection reveals that, indeed, the enamel is cracked. It doesn't look like she broke the tooth from the outside, but like something is pushing out from the inside. She shudders and reminds herself that the dentist will be able to take care of it on Monday. She just has to make it through the weekend, and everything will be fine. At some point during the process of ruminating on the troubles with her teeth, she falls into a restless sleep. The next morning, she wakes up in a state of surprising relief. The pain is gone. She sits up in bed, stretches, and yawns. She catches a glimpse of herself in the mirror across from her bed as she does, and freezes in place. The reason she can't feel her tooth pain anymore is because her teeth are gone. Not all of them, but 6 teeth, the teeth that were aching all week, have vanished. Did they fall out in her sleep? She strips the sheets off her bed, shaking them out, searching for any sign of the missing teeth. Nothing. She feels like she's losing her mind. Teeth can't just up and vanish like that. But where could they have gone? Did she swallow them? Her mind races as she struggles to explain the unexplainable. Wait a minute. she can find out exactly what happened the previous night. She has a security camera installed in her room. She'd almost forgotten about the camera, which had been installed a year prior when an old roommate kept borrowing her clothes without asking. She never bothered to get rid of it. With a rush of gratitude for her past self, she pulls up the app on her phone that logs the footage and selects the folder for the previous night. She scans through the footage, seeing several hours of her sleeping body tossing and turning in bed. Then, in the video, her mouth opens. She watches carefully, her eyes widening, as she struggles to process what comes next. On her phone screen, clear as can be, she can see teeth climbing out of her mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, crawling across her face, down her neck, across the bedspread, and onto her bedside table. That would have been enough to leave her questioning everything she thought she knew about the world, but the video keeps playing. The teeth scuttle around her bedside table, then onto her desk, collecting paper clips, a hair tie, some brightly colored post-it notes, a safety pin, a scrap of string, and a barrette. With their chosen items in tow, the teeth crawl down off of the desk, over the carpet, and out of her bedroom door. How are they getting around? They're walking on what look like little tendrils, but she can't figure out where they came from. Little tendrils poking through the cracks in the teeth? She shudders at the thought. While she slept, her teeth came to life and made a break for it? Where did they go from there? Could they still be in her apartment? She shakily opens the door to her room and peeks out.
Oh my goodness.
She half expects to see the teeth still in the hallway,
oh my goodness.
But when she checks, there's nothing there. She combs every inch of her apartment next. She isn't sure what she'll do if she finds the teeth, the creatures they've become. Maybe try to capture them and take them to the dentist? But it doesn't matter. Her search is useless. They're long gone. The only evidence they were ever even there is a light speckle of blood on her pillowcase, the sheet, and across the carpet. It's such a small amount, she'd never even know it was there if she weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
But now what? She's sitting here with 6 missing teeth, no idea where they went, and no clue what to do next. How could she begin to explain any of this to anyone?
Well,
she can't, she realizes. So, after taking a moment to weigh her options, she deletes the security footage and leaves a voicemail for her dentist, telling them it's an emergency. She lost some teeth in an accident, she tells them. As for the truth, nobody ever needs to know. She wouldn't even know where to start if she decided to try and tell anyone what happened. Better to just put it out of her mind, get her teeth fixed, and try to move on. Later that night, back at the movie theater, the Oompa Loompa from the concession stand is tidying up in the hours after her shift. The limited run of Willy Wonka special screenings is over, and it's time to put all of the Candy Factory decor back in its respective boxes and switch off the chocolate fountain. She breaks down the giant prop lollipops, deflates the jelly bean balloons, and cleans up the chocolate that spilled onto the counter. Might as well sneak a bit of candy for herself in the process and use the sugar rush to make the work go faster. It helps a bit, but there's still a lot to do for one employee at this understaffed theater. By the time she's finished, it's dark outside. Time to pack up her things, scrub off that orange face paint, and head home. As she walks through the back door, a shiver runs down her spine. What's that sound? It sounds like scratching and scrabbling inside the wall behind her. She turns, looking for an animal hiding there, but she can't see anything. Maybe it's a mouse? But just as she's about to turn around and head to her car, she sees a flash of light glinting off of something shiny.
I would run.
Metal?
Run.
All the while, the noise continues, that strange scratching and scrabbling. What the hell is going on over there?
Get out
There's some sort of unknown thing in the walls of the theater, or between the walls of the two buildings at least. Her curiosity gets the better of her, and she finds herself giving into it. Whatever's in there, she needs to see what it could possibly be. She tiptoes over to the crevice between the theater and the building next door to it and peers into the darkness. She can't quite make out what she sees in there, but there's some kind of shape, like a little box. And she can see movement within the shadows there. What is that? She pulls out her phone and is just about to activate the flashlight function when suddenly the crevice lights up in the glow of tiny spotlights? No, miniature flashlights, like the kind you put on a keychain. They're lined up in a row and all switched on at once to illuminate the structure in front of them. Now she can see what it is, but getting a good look at it doesn't make her any less confused. If anything, it's only more baffling than it was before. The structure is visible now, a twisting mass of nerves and blood vessels, wrapped and braided together to form a platform. If she didn't know any better, she'd say it looks like a stage? Yeah, it looks like a stage. And on that stage, constructed from a mixture of trash, string, fabric scraps, buttons, and other random objects, is a set. Paperclips stand tall with colorful buttons attached to the tips of them. At first glance, they resemble the giant lollipops that the movie theater put up for the screenings. And there, in the center of the stage, a long piece of brown ribbon is stretched out to mimic the chocolate river from the movie. A boat made from tinfoil and more of those nerves and blood vessels navigates the chocolate river. The employee was so taken aback by the sight of the makeshift set and stage that she didn't even notice the actors on the stage. When she does, she covers her mouth to stifle a scream. The stage and the set are absolutely covered in human teeth, moving around and putting on a production. On the boat, a tooth dressed in a purple jacket and orange top hat guides a tour group made up of other teeth, dressed as the children and guardians from Willy Wonka.
Oh my goodness.
She opens the camera app on her phone, focuses it on the bizarre play unfolding in front of her, and begins to record. Otherwise, no one will ever believe what she saw here. Then, unable to do anything else, she watches the show. One tooth, a particularly rotund one, is sucked into a pipe out of the chocolate river with the help of practical effects from the nerves. The employee finds herself sitting on the ground, continuing to record the show. She laughs out loud at the sight of a tooth emerging from backstage, painted blue and wrapped in blue fabric to make it look larger and rounder. No, not blue. Violet. It's turning violet. Next, a tooth shrinks, exiting the stage and leaving behind a tiny fake tooth in its place. In between each transformation, another child leaving the chocolate factory tour, a group of orange-painted teeth comes out to perform a dance number. At first, the employee expects them to sing songs of disapproval too, but realizes quickly that these teeth don't have mouths of their own, and therefore can't sing. Still, it's all quite impressive. For the fizzy lifting drink scene, the teeth playing Charlie and Grandpa Joe are lifted up into the air by nerve tendrils, approaching a fan made from safety pins and aluminum foil. It's actually quite tense to watch, and if the employee had an actual seat, she'd be on the edge of it. Then, the show concludes, and an audience full of teeth that she couldn't see before stand up, clapping their tendrils together in a thunderous round of applause. It's the most bizarre thing she's ever seen in her life, but she can't deny that it was entertaining. The teeth then begin to clean up the set, striking pieces and tucking them away in the darkness. Once the set has been broken down, they all scuttle out of sight. And it's over. The employee drives home in a state of shock, uncertain about what to do next. She eventually decides to upload the video footage to the internet, titling the video, "Willy Wonka Performed by Teeth?" By the following day, it has a few thousand views and some skeptical comments. By the day after that, it has a copyright strike and has been removed from the internet. So much for getting the word out about the teeth. The employee never forgets about them, but she gives up on trying to tell people about what she saw. That tooth-based theatrical production is just for her memories now. Meanwhile, local dentists are noticing a pattern. Everyone who attended the screenings of Willy Wonka at that specific movie theater experienced dental issues, followed by sudden, unexplained tooth loss. It's such a concerning trend, it attracts the attention of the SCP Foundation, who began a thorough investigation. After some time looking into it, they designate the phenomenon SCP-3827. SCP-3827 is a cognitohazardous phenomenon that is known to affect certain movie theaters across the United States. Audience members at theaters impacted by SCP-3827 will later report statistically unusual rates of dental problems, including but not limited to gingivitis, pulpitis, and degradation of the dental enamel. It is unknown what exactly causes a theater to be subject to the influence of SCP-3827, but the effects of the anomaly can be exacerbated by the consumption of high-sugar concessions by moviegoers, by screenings of films that prominently feature teeth in at least one scene, or a combination of the two. If it were as simple as just an increase in dental problems, the anomaly might not warrant much Foundation attention, just an increase of fluoride in the local water supply and perhaps an alert to dentists in the surrounding area. However, it does not begin and stop at dental pain and discomfort. The living centers, or pulps, of affected teeth, referred to from now on as SCP-3827-A, will begin to noticeably change over the course of a week following exposure to the cognitohazard. They will grow and expand to the point of pain, causing the enamel of the affected teeth to crack and split from the internal pressure. After approximately a week has passed, the SCP-3827-A instances will eject themselves from the jaws of the affected person while they sleep. Once freed from the jaw, these teeth will push portions of their nerves and blood vessels through the cracks in the enamel, using them as limbs. Now capable of independent movement, the teeth will move themselves around the area, stealing small items such as loose trash, scraps of fabric, buttons, and pins. Once they have grabbed an object of interest, the teeth will attempt to leave the area. Sometimes the teeth are stopped by witnesses, a misplaced step, or a house pet, but frequently they make it out of the house and reach their intended destination. But where do they go next? Naturally, Foundation researchers were curious about the movements of SCP-3827-A instances. So, one affected moviegoer was fitted with miniature tracking devices during a dental checkup at a Foundation-affiliated office. Later that night, when the teeth ejected themselves from the person's mouth, the Foundation was able to track them. The research team followed the tracking device's signal back to the movie theater where these SCP-3827 effects originated, where the affected individual had seen a screening of the then-recent film Life of Pi. The researcher who was tracking the signal followed it all the way to a small crevice in the concrete outside of the theater. He pulled a flashlight from his pocket and cast its light into the crevice. There, he spotted a structure resembling a small theater composed of chips of what appeared to be tooth enamel. On the makeshift stage, several dozen instances of SCP-3827-A were putting on a performance. From the animal costumes and the set piece of a boat constructed from aluminum foil, the agent was able to determine that the living teeth were performing their version of the events of Life of Pi. He stood there for the next hour, allowing them to finish their performance before collecting the instances and bringing them into Foundation containment.
That's good.
Notably, after some time in containment, the teeth began putting on original productions, in addition to live stagings of their favorite films. One original production was described by a research assistant as Star Wars, but with werewolves in it. He added that it was quite moving, actually. I cried. After SCP-3827 was identified and the Foundation was able to properly understand its nature, a set of containment procedures were put into place. Foundation agents embedded within the film industry have been instructed to introduce scenes and motifs involving teeth into films by major studios, particularly those belonging to especially successful franchises. This is intended to root out, no pun intended, theaters affected by SCP-3827. These theaters can then be closed down, the SCP-3827-A instances contained, and any affected individuals can be amnesticized. Contained instances of SCP-3827-A are kept in standard containment cells. As an incentive for good behavior, they are gifted with spare scraps of trash and may be shown a screening of a new film once a month. An addendum has been added to the official file, which I will include here for reference. Following successful Foundation interference with the production of the 2015 film Avengers: Age of Ultron, namely the inclusion of a short sequence depicting the character Iron Man knocking a tooth loose from the Hulk, Foundation agents managed to identify and close down 119 theaters affected by SCP-3827. Despite no new instances having been discovered since, current procedures are to continue until further notice. We go to movie theaters for magic. To laugh, to cry, to care. In my personal opinion, the movies are a sacred place, one where we shouldn't have to worry about our teeth jumping out of our skulls and running off to start a theater troupe. But in this world, things don't always go as planned. Hopefully all of the theaters affected by SCP-3827 have been shut down for good. But you never know for sure. Sometimes, a film brings out emotions in you that you never expected. And sometimes, it brings out your teeth, too. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today.
Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-5150, Anomalous Dental Office.
You're so cute.
The dentist is clocking.
I already seen that one. What else do they have? Just looking. What else? I'll do this one.
The doors of the output booth slide open, exhaling smoke, as the researchers watch with rapt attention. The dial on the console in front of them is set to very fine. A human had stepped into the adjoining booth only minutes ago. A human would not step out. The researchers, feeling some strange, shapeless feeling of unease, asked two of the guards to approach the output booth. These same guards had mainly seen the researchers destroying wristwatches and torturing monkeys with this mysterious machine, so when they approached the booth, the only thing they were expecting to see was a corpse. That's why they didn't even have their hands on their sidearms. That's why, soon, both of them would be dead.
Yep.
A figure emerged from the booth, human only in vague shape. Dark blue skin covered in luminous patches, long, sharp teeth, and a whipping tongue dripping with slime. Too tall, too many eyes. Before the guards can correct their deadly mistake, the monster heaves and vomits, spraying a firehouse spew of neon green vomit. It hits the two guards, who start screeching with pain, screams that are almost drowned out by the deafening chemical hiss of the guards starting to melt. The researchers, tasked with investigating and containing anomalies, had just created a new one, and it was about to go on an all-out rampage. Alarms were sounded. A special response team was called in, heavily armed and heavily armored, to dispatch the beast, but it would not be an easy fight. The creature's acid vomit allows it to melt the door of the testing chamber and escape out into the hall, where it continues to wreak havoc. The members of the special response team open fire with high-caliber assault rifles, none of which seems to pierce the creature's discolored skin. It tears into them with deadly claws. It showers them with its corrosive puke. Before any of them really know what's going on, 6 more of them are dead, and the Foundation is forced to call in additional support. It goes on for hours. The chase, the chaos, the scientists screaming and running, hundreds of thousands of dollars in Foundation property dealing with corrosive damage. A total of 8 dead. So many people injured, and many of the ones who dealt directly with the creature were dealing with partial memory loss.
Oh my goodness.
How did they defeat the monster? Well, they didn't. After several hours of rampaging, the creature became unwell. It experienced trouble breathing, slowed down, and started to show symptoms of extreme pain. It collapsed to the ground and screamed a terrible scream before exploding into blue dust and smoke. The problem had taken care of itself. Not long ago, this terrible beast was a 28-year-old Caucasian man, a D-class, but otherwise a completely unremarkable human being, betraying no inherent anomalous qualities. Anything anomalous about him was imbued, not by some group of interest or unknowable eldritch god, but by the SCP Foundation itself, and a very special anomaly dubbed SCP-914. Today is a special case because a little-known fact about me is that SCP-914 is one of my 3 favorite anomalies. I'll let you guess the other 2 in the comments, but I can assure you that they have already been featured on the channel. 914, also known as the Clockworks, is a fascinating safe-class anomaly held in Research Cell 109-B. The composition of the anomaly itself is relatively simple. 2 booths, an intake and output booth, connected by a vast series of clockwork mechanisms covering 18 square meters. Cogs, servos, screw drives, belts, pulleys, a mainspring. Despite having the anomaly in containment for decades under the watchful eye of the ever-professional Dr. Gears, the exact mechanisms of how the anomaly works have never been fully understood. The part of the anomaly you're most likely to interface with, if ever you're given Level 3 research clearance, is the selection panel. The panel has 5 settings. Each one will cause a different effect on whatever item, material, or individual is placed into the intake booth. I'll give you a quick rundown on the settings, but then we'll get to what we really came here for. Some of the most deranged test logs for any anomaly you've ever seen. The first of the 5 settings is rough. This will brutally annihilate whatever is placed into the intake booth. For example, a kilogram of steel appeared to have been cut into chunks with a laser. A chimp placed into the intake booth on rough. Well, let's just say that animal rights activists would be justifiably unhappy with the results. Then there's coarse. This will also result in the disassembly of whatever is placed into the intake booth, but in a far more methodical fashion. A researcher's wristwatch was placed into the intake booth on course, and it was found in the output booth, neatly divided into its component parts. The Foundation sadly did not reimburse him for the lost wristwatch, but if it was that important to him, he probably shouldn't have volunteered it for testing. Next is one-to-one, and on the one-to-one setting, the result will be a roughly equivalent item or individual to the one placed in the intake booth. To take a rather cliché example, if you were to place a can of Pepsi Max into the intake booth, there's a good chance that you'll get a can of Diet Coke in the output booth. And in case you're wondering, yes, if a person is placed into the intake booth, a relatively similar person aside from slight superficial variations such as race, height, or weight will appear on the other side. Is this existentially horrifying? Absolutely, more on that later. Now things are going to get even stranger with the fine setting. When an item is placed into the intake booth on this setting, the item in the output booth will be a slightly improved version of the original, typically in a non-anomalous manner. Take, for example, a 9mm Beretta handgun, like the one I keep in the glove box of my Honda Civic. If this was placed into the Clockworks, you wouldn't get a laser gun or a gun that controls people's minds, but you might suddenly find yourself packing a Desert Eagle, a far more powerful handgun to say the least. Then there's Very Fine. This setting has, to say the least, been problematic for members of the SCP Foundation. Put simply, the Very Fine setting imbues whatever is placed in the intake booth with a completely random and unpredictable anomalous effect. If you place a Tamagotchi, ask your parents' kids, into the intake booth and set it to Very Fine, it might come out self-aware and morbidly depressed, or it might have the ability to make your head explode with its mind if you forget to feed it. And if you place a D-Class into the intake booth, you might get the acid-spewing, bulletproof abomination that we saw in the opening. Yes, that really did happen, and it's the reason why Dr. Gears put Level 3 clearance on any attempts to test biological material in the Clockworks. That's everything you need to know in order to have a functioning knowledge of the Clockworks. And now, we can get into the fun stuff. There are extensive test logs for the Clockworks, and I've personally selected some of the most deranged and bizarre tests from these logs for your viewing pleasure. And to remind you to proceed with caution if ever you find yourself granted access to testing for SCP-914. It's time to set the video's quality to Very Fine and proceed. In a test by Dr. Grangan, 5 different human corpses were placed into the Clockworks to test the different settings. You can probably guess the first 5, but the setting on Very Fine resulted in the corpse becoming a pile of green slime. This slime was incredibly similar both chemically and structurally to SCP-447, an anomaly that should never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, ever come into contact with dead bodies, for reasons you're not cleared to understand. After this, Dr. Gears forbade the testing of dead bodies in the Clockworks going forward. That would not, however, mean that other incredibly strange other things wouldn't be tested. A researcher, whose name is now redacted, decided to test some tuna sandwiches in the Clockworks. Perhaps he wasn't particularly good at making sandwiches and hoped the Clockworks would give him a hand on that front. On one-to-one, it became a salmon sandwich on rye. On Fine, it became a far higher quality tuna sandwich with softer bread and more flavorful and vitamin-rich tuna. And on Very Fine, it became a loaf of bread shaped like a realistic fish.
Oh, really?
When the door to the output booth opened, the fish swam away through the air. Nobody knows where it is now, though I will say researcher Jones was seen with crumbs on her lab coat afterwards, which may give some clues as to where the anomalous breadfish ended up. The next test was so serious that it required approval from the O5 Council, the very top echelon of Foundation Command. That approval was granted, and several samples of SCP-939, the nightmarish creature's codenamed With Many Voices, were requisitioned for testing. On Rough and Coarse, the creatures were completely obliterated, and on One-to-One, the results were redacted. But the truly frightening things occurred when the anomalies were put into the input booth on Fine and Very Fine. On Fine, the creature seemed physically intact, but respiration and vital signs had ceased. The creature was dead.
Oh my goodness.
On Very Fine, the creature was reduced to a pile of smoldering white ash.
Oh my goodness.
According to the perspective of SCP-914, it seems that the ideal state of existence for SCP-939 is being dead or even completely destroyed. I'll leave you to unpack the implications of that.
Oh my goodness.
Moving on. Dr. Falconis decided to test a copy of the biography Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. On One-to-One, the result was a biography entitled Bill Gates, also by Isaacson. detailing the life and times of the Microsoft founder. On Fine, it produced a DVD of Steve Jobs narrating his autobiography.
Yeah.
On Very Fine, the result was a metallic cube. When a button on the cube was pressed, it activated a small hologram of deceased Apple founder Steve Jobs, who appeared to be sapient and able to answer any questions about the real-life late CEO's life. Dr. Curtis, an office joker, decided to get extra weird with it. He included a pack of bacon and a photo of the infamous anomaly SCP-682, the hard-to-kill reptile. This was already on the odder side of the scale. We don't even know how he came up with that, but the result was even stranger. On Very Fine, the result was a tiny version of SCP-682 made of cooked bacon. Much like the larger, non-bacon version of SCP-682, it was extremely violent and aggressive, but had a pleasing smell, and instead of roaring, it made the sound of sizzling bacon. Dr. Curtis suggested classifying the anomaly as SCP-682-BAC, a suggestion that was rejected by Foundation higher-ups. We're not sure what happened to the little bacon SCP-682, but personally I suspect it might be another victim of researcher Jones' almost anomalous appetite. Dr. Gears left a note on the testing log saying, "Very funny, Dr. Curtis. You are suspended from testing SCP-914 until further notice. Though I have to admit, it smelled delicious." Dr. Greer decided to test a canister of Fox Labs White Lightning pepper spray, which, upon being placed in the intake booth on Very Fine, became a chili pepper. When tested, this chili pepper had a Scoville heat rating of over 300 million, making it by far the hottest chili pepper on Earth. Dr. Clef's suggestion to donate it to Hot Ones was denied. Dr. Armand and Agent McKnight, a duo of huge fans of the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, donated a series of their copies for testing. Predictably, Rough and Course destroyed the books. On 1-to-1, the Lord of the Rings Compendium book was separated into the 3 smaller books that comprise the trilogy: The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. On Fine, things started to get particularly exciting for any devoted Lord of the Rings obsessive. The book became a copy of the One Ring, the famous mystical item from the novels created by the Dark Lord Sauron to seek domination of Middle-earth. The ring was made out of paper, inscribed with a book-accurate poem in the Black Speech and the ability to resize to the wearer's finger. On Very Fine, it became a different, shorter book entitled A New Shadow, with a plot centered around a boy called Eldarion. Tolkien scholars would be quick to point out that this was the title of a scrapped story that Tolkien intended to write. Agent McKnight appended a frantic note to the study saying, "You can have the ring, Armand, but I want the book. I'm going to copy this thing. Any Tolkien fans want to read it?" This would not be the only time a classic nerd would use SCP-914 to live out certain pop culture fantasies, but the next time it happened would carry considerably more severe consequences. As researcher Mason brought in his collection of LEGO Star Wars X-Wing fighters from home. The tests on most of these were predictable, until of course it was put on the Very Fine setting, where things got considerably more chaotic. As you might have guessed, it became a real and functional miniature X-Wing fighter. When the output booth was opened, it flew out and began attacking, using its tiny laser cannons to kill several members of personnel. It managed to dodge and weave around all attempts to stop it before escaping the Foundation entirely. Its current whereabouts are unknown, so if you see a tiny Lego X-Wing flying around, I'd advise you to duck and cover. Next, Dr. Dextrania submitted a Beretta M9 handgun for testing on Very Fine. While the gun appeared normal, when fired, its bullets detected the nearest form of life and honed in on them. This had disastrous results, as the bullet weaved towards the nearest security guard and immediately killed him. Strangely, the cause of death was not trauma caused by the bullet, but by cardiac arrest. Dr. Dextrania appended a note to this study, reading, "I'm not sure if the bullets should be used as actual ammunition, as they pose a huge threat to other personnel. I'm requesting that testing of bullets on Very Fine is prohibited." A member of the O5 Council approved this request. Researcher L. Inselman decided to get controversial and brought in a copy of Mein Kampf, the infamous book by Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. On Very Fine, the book became a tiny origami caricature of Hitler himself, which would awkwardly goose-step around, shouting taunts and boasts. After the creation of Tiny Paper Hitler, the site director gave a mandate that staff members can kick him around in order to relieve stress. For the record, I wholeheartedly approve. Dr. Rodriguez put a full DVD box set of the American television sitcom The Office into the Clockworks and set the device to Fine. at which point it produced a mosaic portrait of the character Dwight Schrute, played by actor Rainn Wilson, made out of fragments of the DVDs. Researcher Blaze brought in 2 pairs of UV-protecting sunglasses for testing on both rough and 1-to-1, both of which, strangely, had anomalous effects on the glasses. The glasses on rough became a small pane of glass, but when this pane of glass is looked through in the direction of a light source, the observer will experience severe hallucinations.
Whoa,
these include seeing dragons roiling in
weird.
smoke, birds with blue flaming wings and horns like a goat, and a deer with enormous antlers and, quote, crazy floating orbs. Researchers have conducted further tests on whether these anomalous effects have any connections to the incredibly powerful and highly dangerous SCP-2845. The other pair of sunglasses that researcher Blaze put through the clockworks on Fine also had peculiar results, but in a very different fashion. They became mirrored, aviator-style shades that had a mimetic effect on viewers, where they felt compelled to comment on how stylish and hip they looked. A beautiful statement piece to complete any summer look you might have in mind. Researcher Blaze noted, "Definitely the most sexy pair of sunglasses I've ever seen in my life. I have to keep them if I'm ever going to get a date." Their supervisor, Dr. Veritas, replied, "Sure, Blaze, of course I'm going to let you keep an anomalous object for your personal gain. I stored it in the anomalous item wing for study. Don't ask where, I'm not telling you." The unprofessional nature of researcher Blaze's conduct was nothing compared to the trouble that researcher Wood got into for trying to test a vial of corrosive slime extracted from SCP-106. When he attempted to conduct the test, guards wrestled him away and detained him. After evaluation from site directors, he was transferred off-site for safety reasons. The SCP Foundation really didn't need another SCP-106 to worry about. Researchers misusing and abusing the clockworks is a bit of a running theme, as we also discovered with junior researcher Summers. She claimed to be testing a hair clip on Fine, but in the decisive moment, she instead stepped into the intake booth herself, defying all ethical standards. When she emerged from the output booth, she had clearer skin, longer hair, and a better figure. This did not help her when she was immediately apprehended by Foundation guards in the aftermath. Dr. Veritas said in the aftermath, "She told us she just wanted to try with her hair clip. By the time we realized what she was actually doing, it was too late to stop her. Needless to say, she's since been terminated, and I hope I don't need to tell you all to not do it again." Researcher Westron decided to bring the ambition back down to sensible levels. He put 50 small glass jars full of strawberry jello into the intake booth and set the dial to very fine. The result was an intricate glass jar shaped like a human skull, filled with the same strawberry jello. The skull's lower jaw moved and vocalized the word "squish" before never moving or speaking again. Dr. G, a researcher who also had a sideline performing as a gangster rapper in the mid-90s, decided to test a full Santa suit on the 1-to-1 feature. The result? An outfit where the red and white color values were shifted. Afterwards, Dr. G was heard grumbling, "Dang it, I was hoping for a Grinch suit." Dr. Lloyd, another researcher, took a cement lion statue from his front yard and decided to bring it in for testing, anticipating that putting it through on Very Fine would probably result in a rampaging stone lion running around the containment site, so he instead decided to play it safe and test it on 1-to-1. The result was not what he expected. It became an exact copy of SCP-173, the sculpture. While it would later come to light that the sculpture was not anomalous like the true SCP-173, upon initially seeing it, Dr. Lloyd did have a panic attack. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to test results for the clockworks, and perhaps, if there's sufficient enthusiasm in the comments, we'll do some more someday. One needs to be careful when dealing with the seductive nature of the clockworks and its offer of quick improvements. You may just end up getting a lot more than you bargained for. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-2450, Teeth.
Alright, so teeth. What else is there? Let me see what else I want to. This one. Let's see.
Its leathery wings spread out, tattooed in arcane symbols of cultures long wiped out. Its clawed feet pad the linoleum, each step leaving a black scorch mark that stinks of brimstone. Steaming drool drips from the creature's burning tusks, nestled in concentric circles beneath its glowing, blood-red eyes. Its terrible gaze has already locked onto its prey, its quarry, and nothing will possibly deter it from getting what it wants. Fair trade organic bananas, 25% off.
It just wants.
The college student awakens in his trash dorm after another night of debauchery. His head is swimming. His tongue feels like sandpaper. The room is littered with empty cans, solo cups, and bottles, and his roommate is still out cold next to him, having had his face graffitied by some jokester with a black marker. But the college student isn't thinking about the night before. Not that he could remember any of it anyway. He's thinking about his rumbling stomach. He needs to get some food and a drink in him, or else he's going to feel terrible all day. He knows exactly what he needs. A bacon omelet and a tall, cool glass of OJ, the breakfast of champions. There's only one problem. When the college student checks the communal fridge, he sees that there is no orange juice and no eggs. That's when a flood of memories washes over him, less like a cool, refreshing sea breeze, and more like being waterboarded. The previous night, he and his idiot friends had made that delicious, life-saving orange juice disappear into a series of screwdrivers, and in their altered state, they'd thrown all the eggs at each other.
That's what they
Man,
do,
he thinks, this is embarrassing. I've really got to get my act together. But before he can get any sweeping life changes put in place, he still needs to solve the breakfast conundrum. Bacon omelet and a tall glass of OJ or bust. He throws on a light jacket, puts on his shoes, makes sure his roommate is lying on his side just to be safe, and heads out into town. That's where he'll find the means to make his breakfast dreams a reality. On his omelet odyssey, the college student passes a few of the local boutique cafes. They probably have what he needs, but on a student's budget, especially considering the money he probably blew on the previous night's rager, he thinks it's more economical to just buy the ingredients and make the breakfast himself. His mom and dad had always told him that college was about building life skills, after all. But that's when a second problem presents itself. For some reason, every grocery store or supermarket he passes seems to be closed. What gives? Is it some kind of national holiday that had somehow slipped his mind? As his hungover head pounds like someone installed a tiny construction worker with a pneumatic drill inside his brain, the hopelessness of this whole situation is beginning to dawn on him. Is he doomed to an omelet-free hell of his own making, just for the crime of wanting to have fun on a Saturday night? Life can be so cruel sometimes. But in the college student's lowest moment, a glimmer of hope presents itself. It seems he's absent-mindedly wandered off the beaten track, far closer to the edge of town than he'd intended to go. And while he's there, he spots what could be his salvation. But before we go any further, I have a question for you.
What is it?
Does something feel wrong with you? Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or if you're just a human who lives in this world who's going through a hard time, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, and this is an important mission because finding a therapist can be really hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is It looks like a store, an honest-to-goodness supermarket, with the sign above the entrance reading, Babylon's. With a newly formed spring in his step, the college student makes a beeline. He can taste that hearty omelet and dose of vitamin C already. Once inside, the college student wastes no time looking for his eggs and OJ. Nothing about the store seems particularly strange until he ends up face to face with one of the people working there. Typically, he's used to seeing people his age or even younger working as store assistants. The man he's staring at has got to be in his mid-40s, and despite his somewhat dweeby uniform, he's one of the most intimidating people the college student has ever seen. His large, muscular arms bulge out of the baby blue uniform shirt, covered in what looks like intimidating gang tats. The man's head is completely shaved, with a long scar underneath one eye, and a series of teardrop tattoos under the other. The college student can't help but think, holy hell, they started hiring death row inmates here?
Yeah.
Strangely, this incredibly scary man looks more nervous to see the college student in here. Like having a customer in the store was a scenario they somehow hadn't covered in the employee training manual. The college student politely insists that he won't need any help. He's just here for eggs and a carton of orange juice. As he walks further into the store, the college student can't help but realize that the strange man isn't an outlier. Anytime he sees an employee of the store, they're a large, beefy man covered in tattoos who looks like he should be doing 25 to life in San Quentin. He's wondering if maybe the store is getting a tax break for hiring ex-cons when he sees something strange down the aisle in front of him, loitering in the refrigerated section. It's mist, but not the kind of dispersed mist you see out in the world. It's more like a solid column of mist.
It's a ghost.
If the college student didn't know any better, he might have even thought that the column of mist was oddly humanoid.
It is.
But he blinks and the mist is gone. So maybe it was just some strange product of his hungover imagination. He thinks, man, I hope I didn't party so hard I gave myself brain damage. He continues his egg quest, undeterred by the strangeness that he's seen so far. But another problem seems to be presenting itself. All of the products here are a little strange and unfamiliar.
What do they
Without even
like?
trying, he's somehow found himself in the candy section, and despite having a youthful sweet tooth, he doesn't recognize any of the brands around him.
What are they?
One that catches his eye is a ghost-shaped candy labeled Candied Souls, which he thinks to be a strangely morbid name. He gives the candy a light squish to see if it's gummy or a hard candy, but when he does, it lets out an almost imperceptible, ghostly wail. The noise is still enough to shock the college student into dropping it. The candied soul falls to the ground, where it bounces once and then comes to rest. He looks up to the section on the shelf he picked it up from, and to his astonishment, a new one appears to replace the other one, right before his eyes. It just materializes out of thin air.
Are they
Impossible.
real souls?
Before the college student's mind can even process all the implications of the thing he's just seen, he turns to see an immense being entering the aisle next to him, shaking the ground with each footstep. It's easily 7 or 8 feet tall, with leathery, dragon-like skin and long, twisted horns emerging out of its skull. The monster lumbers, its tail whipping with excitement, its fangs born. The monster speaks in a deep, rumbling voice like a volcano preparing to erupt.
Oh, they've got a special on candied souls. It's my lucky day.
Without a moment's hesitation, the college student screams and runs in the opposite direction. There's a monster in the store, a demon, something straight out of hell. And even though the demon doesn't seem to be behaving aggressively, in fact, it's downright confused as to why the college student decided to scream and run, the college student is racked with mortal fear. Screw the orange juice, screw the omelet, he needs to get out of here before he's turned into breakfast. In fear's grasp, he isn't thinking logically. He's just running around the store in incoherent terror, trying not to be caught by beings that aren't even chasing him. Strangely, he does notice out of the corner of his eye that the staff aren't freaking out. They're acting like the freakish creature in the store is perfectly normal, just another run-of-the-mill customer. This place is clearly completely insane. On the way to the exit, the college student finds himself frozen at the front windows, staring out at the madness occurring in the parking lot. A series of cars have pulled up on the asphalt as the doors of the cars open, and a menagerie of nightmarish impossibilities pour out. Gooey insectoid beasts with a horrifying number of legs. Long, coiling snake-like entities covered in thorns. Beasts made entirely of blood-colored slime. Winged horrors covered in eyes. So many things beyond description. The college student's mind can barely process what he's seeing. While he's got hell amassing in front of him, the college student has no idea that heaven is getting closer and closer behind. He feels a strange warmth, unlike anything he's ever experienced, spreading across his back. A voice that seems to speak straight to his soul says, "Excuse me." When the college student sees the creature standing behind him, his eyes begin to water in pure reverence. It's a being torn out of the most ancient scriptures, almost impossible for the brain to comprehend. A series of spinning golden rings, covered in eyes of every color, wreathed in fire, and topped by a number of floating crowns. Behind it, 6 wings as pure and white as untouched snow, beat magnificently. Any thought of eggs or orange juice is wiped from the college student's mind by the mere sight of it before him.
Be not afraid,
the angelic creature says.
I was just wondering if you knew where I could find some toilet paper in here.
The college student isn't interested in telling the impossible creature where it can find the toilet paper. He just wants to get out of this store. He just wants to survive. If he gets out of here alive, he swears he'll never party again. In a moment of lucidity, he sees the exit and runs for it, knowing this might be his only chance to survive the morning. He runs, trying to purge the angelic splendor from his eyes. When his feet hit the blacktop outside, he knows he's got a chance, even if the parking lot is full of demons and heavenly beings. But he doesn't expect to see a number of black tactical vehicles screech into the parking lot as men in suits and sunglasses pour out of the vehicles. They don't seem like they're here to help. They seem like they're here to get him. The college student does his best to frantically explain himself. Wait, please, I just wanted some eggs and OJ. I just wanted some eggs and OJ. But his protests are cut off when one of the men gets him in a headlock and forces a rag covered in chloroform over his face. Darkness falls. When the college student wakes up, he's in his dorm room again, surrounded by the same trash and the same graffitied sleeping roommate. He has no memories of the events that transpired before. All he knows is that he's hungry and thirsty. He drags himself up off the ground, head pounding, and schleps his way over to the fridge. An omelet and a glass of orange juice sound good right about now. And lucky for him, when he opens his fridge, a carton of eggs and a carton of orange juice are both waiting for him, though he's not sure why he bought the OJ with pulp. This is hardly a normal retail experience, unless you find yourself shopping at SCP-2854, also codenamed the Little Shop Mart of Horrors, though it's best known to its customers as Babylons. To the untrained eye, it appears to be an abandoned supermarket located 3 kilometers from Foundation Containment Site 118, but to those with the proper clearances, it's known to be a bizarre menagerie of anomalous phenomena. During the anomalous supermarket's business hours, cars will appear in the parking lot, delivering instances of the entities known as SCP-2854-1. These entities can manifest in a variety of forms, some of which we still haven't received full documentation on, but here are some of the primary documented forms. First, the incorporeal forms. One of them is a form with visible eyes wrapped in long lengths of intangible chains. The others are mist-like creatures with no discernible facial features. The corporeal beings are considerably more intimidating to look at. These include angelic entities in the biblically accurate sense, with many wings and eyes, and their counterparts, large entities that appear consistent with the multiplicity of demons described in Christian mythology. In terms of general layout, Babylon's is not dissimilar to your typical small independent supermarket. There are checkout lanes, a stock room, and multiple aisles of products. I imagine you're probably wondering what kind of products they sell at Babylon's, and lucky for you, we have some declassified files on that too. One available confectionery product is a candy labeled Candied Souls, a gummy shaped like a cartoon ghost, packaged in pink wrapping paper. They also sell eggs holding tridents, producing flame from an unknown source in an airtight red container adorned with pentagrams. They're labeled deviled eggs. For those with more carnivorous tastes, there are hot dogs with 3 separate cylindrical-shaped heads that each bark independently of each other, wrapped in a plastic container labeled Demon Dogs. And of course, there is green-colored bread in the shape of humanoid entities undergoing an advanced state of decomposition, wrapped in a plastic container labeled Unbread. Very cute, I'm sure you'll agree. When the products are removed from the shelves, they will regenerate automatically, with the speed of their regeneration depending on the level of demand for the product in the store. The longest interval for regeneration is 30 minutes. The shortest is 1 second. Where the products come from is still a mystery. The currency that the SCP-2854-1 entities pay for the products with is also unidentified. It's paper currency written in an unknown script with a picture of a gnome on it. Once the products have been purchased, the entities will return to their card and demanifest. A perfectly reasonable transaction, in a manner of speaking.
They go home
The Foundation was
somewhere.
doing an admirable job keeping this anomaly contained, but like many small businesses, Babylon soon found its clientele being poached by the local Walmart. This was the cause of the currently most conspicuous containment breach, Incident 2854-A.
Yeah.
2 instances of SCP-2854-1, which the Foundation has since learned were named Gregory and Alma, manifested
Really?
outside the anomalous store, only to find that it was closed and devoid of personnel. The 2 impossible entities returned to their car and disappeared
They're
before appearing at a
beautiful.
Walmart in Wilmington, North Carolina, for some late-night shopping. As Gregory and Alma entered the store, audio and video were recorded by the in-store CCTV cameras, and an immediate look of terror was plastered across the faces of everyone in their proximity. Gregory walked forward, trying to get a sense of the store's layout while scratching his head with long claws. He murmured out in a deep, demonic voice,
This sucks. Babylon's was closed, and now we're forced to go to a different supermarket. I hope that we don't have to do this on a daily basis.
Poor thing.
Alma, who trailed not far behind him, said,
Well, maybe we'll get lucky, and Babylon's will be open later. We can always go back to check. You don't have to go here if you don't want to.
Gregory grumbled.
Nah, we already walked in the door. We have a commitment to shop here now. Hey, there's an employee. Maybe he can help us.
The employee was turned in the opposite direction, doing a listless stocktake on a ratty old clipboard as the 2 entities approached. Gregory politely asked where they could find the organic produce section. They were from out of town and had never visited a Walmart. Just as the employee was mindlessly droning out that the organic produce could be found on aisle 4, he turned and saw who, or what, he was actually talking to. His eyes teared up despite himself. His legs began to tremble. It was impossible. He had to be seeing things, but he wasn't. He clenched his jaw and braced for death, but instead, he got a jolt of energy. He turned and ran, screaming that there were monsters in the store. Gregory and Alma gave chase, still confused about where to find the organic produce they'd come in looking for. As they called for the employee to slow down, he just screamed louder and made a beeline for the exit, followed by a stampede of panicked customers. Gregory grimaced, confused, and muttered,
Well, crap. The customer service here is terrible.
Guess whose idea it was to shop here, Gregory?
quipped Alma.
Oh, shut up, Alma. We'll find it on our own.
As Alma and Gregory split up to explore the store, hoping the organic produce revealed itself, a night guard frantically called the police, ranting and raving about actual monsters having invaded the store. This was only going to make the chaos worse, as 3 different groups were alerted by the call: the local Wilmington Police, the SCP Foundation, and the Unusual Incidents Unit. For those not aware, the Unusual Incidents Unit is one of the more obscure and ineffectual groups of interest that the SCP Foundation occasionally both collaborates and clashes with. They're the anomalous department of the FBI, investigating cases of an unusual nature. They're highly understaffed, underfunded, and under-equipped compared to the SCP Foundation, and even the Global Occult Coalition. Most of the time, they inconvenience the Foundation by getting under their feet during important investigations. This was yet another one of these instances. Soon enough, a blockade of UIU agents and standard, non-anomalous police were marshaled around the Walmart, yelling over a loudspeaker for Gregory and Alma to come out and surrender. Naturally, this made them start bickering again.
Guess our shopping trip attracted more attention than we thought.
What was your first clue? The panicking customers? Maybe the cashier that thought we were psychos? Wow, how could you possibly figure that out, Gregory? You must be a genius or something.
Oh, just shut up, Alma. That attitude of yours is getting on my last goddamn nerve.
Oh my goodness.
Let's just go, okay?
Argument.
They're not going to let us leave peacefully anyway.
Gregory and Alma exited Walmart, at which point they were mobbed and apprehended by the UIU agents, at which point the SCP Foundation arrived to take over the situation. They contained Gregory and Alma harmlessly in Type 3 spectral mutagen allocators. Everyone in attendance was anesthetized and then released, all no thanks to the UIU. Since Incident 2854-A was documented, the Foundation has classified SCP-2854 as Euclid and modified its containment procedures accordingly. The Foundation purchased the land on which the seemingly abandoned store is located and erected a 2-meter-tall chain-link fence around the perimeter. The store is staffed by a rotating collection of D-Class and undercover Foundation agents, who are to remain up to date on the placement of products within the store so as to better assist the SCP-2854-1 instances. Satisfied customers are less likely to shop elsewhere, after all. The embedded personnel take an active role in the containment of SCP-2854-1 instances within a 5-mile radius of SCP-2854. Anyone who requests a transfer will be given a complimentary course of Class A amnestics to ensure that they won't carry any of the memories to their next assignment. I imagine most people working in retail wish that their employers had similar procedures. As a regular patron of my own local corner store, I can confirm that trying to find reasonable prices these days is its own special circle in the Inferno. But as long as we don't find ourselves wandering the Isles of Babylons, then perhaps we could all be doing a lot worse. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-4703, the Anomalous Superstore, perfectly legal.
I'm just gonna do one more, and that'll be it. I'll just do one more. I'll do this.
When the man left his home for a walk in the park this afternoon, he never guessed that he would encounter a monster. But now here he is, standing face to face with the most terrifying thing he has ever seen.
Oh my goodness.
He heard it before he saw it, the sound of dozens of legs skittering across the ground, growing closer and closer until the thing crept into view. At first, he doesn't believe what he sees. It looks like a centipede, but it's so much bigger. Like something out of a monster movie from the 50s. Attack of the 5-foot centipede. But he won't stick around to let this thing attack him. He turns and makes a break for it, running as fast as he can until his chest begins to burn from the effort. He stops, panting, and curses himself for not going for runs more often. But hopefully, he's managed to elude the creature. He turns around, and all the color drains from his face. There it is, right behind him. He shouts at it, waving his arms, trying to scare it off, but it just keeps coming. Okay, he didn't want to try this, but there's only one thing to do with a bug that won't leave you alone, even a giant one. He lifts his foot, and as the huge centipede approaches, he stomps on it. There's a crunching sound as his foot breaks through the carapace, then a sickening splat. He feels a brief surge of guilt for stomping on the thing. After all, he's usually the type to carry spiders outside rather than squish them. But desperate times call for desperate measures. He wipes his foot off on the grass and continues toward home. Every so often on his walk back, he thinks he hears that sickening skittering sound. But every time he turns to look, there's nothing there. Whatever freaky mutant bug he encountered in the park, it's dead. Or at least it's far too wounded to follow him home. What is he thinking? Even if it wasn't hurt, bugs can't track people, and they don't hold grudges. At least, he hopes they don't, as he swallows the anxious lump in his throat. Once he's back at home, he's able to put all thoughts of the nightmare encounter in the park out of his mind. He orders a pizza for dinner as a bit of a special treat, watches a bit of TV, and heads to bed. It's a little stuffy in the room tonight, and the air conditioning is busted, so he leaves his window open to cool the room down. It's a safe neighborhood, he's done it before. He settles in for bed and doesn't give the wide-open window a second thought, never once considering what might come crawling through.
Oh my goodness.
When he wakes up the next morning, the bed feels different somehow. It takes him a moment to register the sensation, but as his eyes slowly flutter open, he realizes what has changed. There's someone in bed with him. Not someone. Something. He yanks back the covers to reveal the giant centipede curled up in bed beside him. His stomach roils, and he tastes acid in the back of his throat. How did it... The window. It came in through the window. But how did it find him? And more importantly, why doesn't it even look injured? The creature stirs, antenna twirling, and it turns to look at him. It takes a moment to stretch as if it too is waking up, and it begins to crawl toward him. All rational thought abandons the man, leaving him with nothing but fight or flight. He chooses the latter, but not before grabbing the lamp off of his bedside table and throwing it at the thing. Hopefully that's enough to slow it down. He grabs his phone and runs out the front door, not even stopping to put on shoes or lock the front door. Thankfully, the centipede doesn't chase after him, at least as far as he can tell. His legs collapse beneath him, and he sinks to his knees in his yard, heart still racing from the shock. With shaking hands, he searches for information on a nearby exterminator and makes the call. He'll pay whatever the exterminator wants. He'll double the rate if that's what it takes. Whatever gets him here as soon as humanly possible. 15 minutes later, the pest control truck pulls into his driveway, and an exterminator steps out. The man isn't sure how to explain his problem exactly, so he settles on centipede infestation. This guy's a professional. Surely he's seen something like this before, if anyone has ever seen anything like this before. The man watches from the sidewalk as the exterminator opens the front door, stepping inside. As he does, he lets out a high-pitched scream. Then, suddenly, he topples backward, landing hard on the ground. On top of him is the centipede. It swarms over him, holding him down. The man watches helplessly for a moment before springing into action. He rushes to the garage and grabs a shovel before coming to the aid of the exterminator. Summoning all his strength, he slams the shovel into the centipede, sending it flying off of its intended victim. He doesn't stop there. He hits the centipede with the shovel again and again and again until it stops moving. Then he extends a hand to the exterminator, helping him up. Now, he explains, the exterminator sees the sort of problem he's been dealing with. He asks the exterminator if he can help, but he says nothing in response. Instead, the exterminator simply turns, ashen-faced, and walks back to his truck. He climbs inside, starts the engine, and floors it out of the neighborhood, driving as fast as the truck will go. The man is alone again, with this bug he can't seem to squash. He turns back to assess the carcass of the centipede, and his jaw drops at what he sees next. The carapace is rebuilding itself, closing up the holes, and refilling the dents left by the shovel. Legs bent out of place straighten out again, back where they belong. The goo that he assumed was the bug's innards is absorbed back into its body, and as he watches, it rolls over and rights itself again, then comes crawling toward him. As it reaches him, it stops and rears back, lifting the front of its body off the ground. The shovel is useless to defend himself. He knows that now. Instead, he freezes, staring at the monster before him, waiting for it to strike. But it doesn't. It just looks at him for a long while, before extending one of its legs toward him in a deliberate gesture. It almost looks like, and this makes no sense, the thing is asking for a handshake. Slowly, tentatively, with utter disbelief, the man extends his hand and grasps the spindly little appendage. Using its entire body to move the leg, the centipede lifts the man's hand up and then pushes it down. He laughs at this, a sudden barking sound that surprises both him and the centipede. But he can't help it. It's all so absurd. He just shook hands with a bug. But as bizarre as the situation is, he also feels a wave of relief wash over him. Whatever this thing is, and it definitely is no ordinary bug, it doesn't seem like it wants to hurt him.
No, it doesn't.
So, unsure of what to do other than give in to the absurdity of the moment, the man walks back into his house with the centipede right on his heels. He shuts the door behind them and turns to his uninvited house guest. So, you like TV? Its antennae wave curiously, and it appears to be waiting for a response. He picks up the remote and switches on the television. Then, on the weirdest Sunday of his life, he and the giant centipede watch some TV together. He eats a few pieces of leftover pizza and, not wanting to be rude, offers a slice to the centipede. Much to his surprise, the bug takes the slice in its mandibles and promptly eats it. That night, the man puts down some newspaper on his floor to give the centipede a place to sleep, but the bug insists on crawling into his bed again instead. At first, he protests, but he has to admit it's kind of nice to have some company, even if it's a bit unconventional. He always wanted a dog, but his allergies made it impossible. So maybe, in a weird way, This is the next best thing? When he wakes up, the centipede is gone. He scans the room, looking for any signs of it, but he can't see anything. He calls out for it and hears the skittering of legs approaching the room. When the centipede enters, he notices it's carrying something. The TV remote. It crawls up onto the bed and drops the remote into his lap like a loyal dog delivering the paper to its owner. Unsure of what else to do, he gives the centipede a gentle pat on its back. Hey, thanks, bud. The centipede continues bringing him little gifts in the morning, such as the TV remote, his phone, and his glasses, and once it even brings him some mail that was slipped through the slat in the door. As the days progress, and he grows more used to his many-legged friend, he notices some changes in its appearance and behavior. It's getting smarter, responding to verbal commands in a way it couldn't before. It's figured out how to open doors, how to turn on the TV by itself, and which channels the man likes best. There are some downsides to keeping the critter around. It insists on eating a serving of whatever he's having for any given meal, and working from home is difficult with the risk of the thing scuttling through the background of a video call. But otherwise, he's starting to get used to this new addition to the household. Even when the centipede develops what he can only describe as thumbs along some of its front legs, appendages it can use to grab items and interact with the world more like a person, he isn't disturbed. Nothing surprises him anymore. The only time he is truly shocked by the centipede's changes is the day it speaks its first words. One morning, he hears a creaky little high-pitched voice say,
"TV time."
It shouldn't be possible, but it's the centipede speaking to him. He can't see a mouth that might produce the words, but somehow the thing has figured out how to talk. Its vocabulary continues to grow, and it picks up words and phrases that the man uses on a regular basis. The thing is becoming less like a pet and more like a friend, a little buddy that wants to be just like him in as many ways as it can. He comes up with a new nickname for the centipede, Junior. It takes to the name immediately, responding when called and always running to answer. As the two grow closer, they pass the days together with a simple routine. Wake up, have breakfast together, work from home while keeping it a secret as best you can, dinner and evening TV, and bed before they do it all again the next day. It's not a bad little life, though he knows it would look horrifying to an uninformed outsider. The man becomes so accustomed to his new routine and his new companion that he almost forgets about the exterminator who is scared off by the centipede. But when his doorbell rings and he opens it to find two strange men waiting on his doorstep with a clipboard full of questions about giant bugs, he remembers. As it turns out, the exterminator quickly spread the word about his terrifying encounter, and his story caught the attention of an organization that specializes in, to use their words, the cataloging of previously undiscovered flora and fauna. Much to his dismay, the men take Junior away from him, but they promise that he may be able to come and visit once they've determined it's safe. They take Junior to the nearest SCP Foundation site and give it a new name, SCP-3153. SCP-3153 refers to a series of arthropods that superficially resemble the Scolopendra polymorpha species of centipedes native to northwestern Oregon. These creatures measure approximately 1.76 meters in length, and they weigh an average of 82 kilograms. I don't mean to disrespect these creatures, but that is a great deal larger than any centipede I am comfortable being in the presence of. Beneath the surface of their chitinous carapace, SCP-3153 instances are made from a mass of something similar to totipotent stem cells, though they act at a much, much faster rate. The function of these cells is to form new organs, limbs, and tissues depending on how much SCP-3153 instances interact with and form emotional bonds with human subjects. These adaptations appear to be an attempt by SCP-3153 instances to mimic and please whichever human they are bonding with. Upon initial contact with a human that it is interested in, an instance of SCP-3153 will operate with sophisticated animal intelligence. It will use this intelligence to attempt to be useful to its chosen human. Some of its behaviors at this stage include bringing small objects to the human subject that they will need in the morning, such as their toothbrush or eyeglasses. They have also been known to swarm over a perceived intruder to the subject's home in an attempt to protect them from harm. During this phase, they will also begin to mimic the human subject by eating the same foods as them or nesting on their bed like a dog or cat might. If this attention has not been reciprocated, and if the human attempts to harm the instance, it will display an impressive ability to regenerate from almost any physical harm. Even if they are attacked by their chosen human, SCP-3153 instances will never fight back. They are docile, forgiving, and persistent in their pursuit of a bond.
Aww.
The instance will continue to bring items to the subject, nest nearby, and otherwise try to ingratiate itself to them, until the human speaks to the instance in a friendly manner, leaves it an offering of food, or otherwise expresses the reciprocation of the bond. During this period, SCP-3153 instances will shed human-adjacent biological tissue from its massive stem-like cells.
He loves the company.
Though these blobs of tissue are unpleasant to stumble on or step on in the middle of the night on the way to the bathroom, they are usually completely harmless and are just part of the instance's preparation for its inevitable adaptation. As SCP-3153 instances spend more time with a human subject, they gradually develop the ability to recognize human facial expressions and discern their meaning. They become more affectionate at this stage and will often attempt to stand upright and give their favorite human a hug, which is either adorable or a bit terrifying depending on your perspective. I myself land somewhere in the middle. SCP-3153 instances will generally remain close to their human at all times, attempting to keep them safe from any possible harm. During this stage of bonding, they develop a greater understanding of language and technology, as well as the necessary anatomical adaptations to use them, such as hands with thumbs, mouths capable of speech, and vocal folds that produce a speaking voice. The adaptations only continue from here, as the SCP-3153 instance attempts to become more and more like their favorite human. However, as much as they might try, the instance will not be capable of accurately replicating the form or behavior of a human. The result is either an endearingly bumbling attempt, or what some have described as smack dab in the middle of the uncanny valley. But the process doesn't stop there. Remember the shedding, the unpleasant blobs of organic tissue all over the place. The shedding increases at this point, and can cause quite a mess if it is not attended to. Luckily, SCP-3153 instances are good listeners, and 92% of them will follow directions if they are told to reduce their shedding. Some of them get a bit too creative with this prompt and attempt to reshape their shed material into something edible, which they then present to their human as gifts. If the human refuses these gifts, the SCP-3153 instance will become incredibly sad and will retreat from socialization for a period after due to its hurt feelings. When the Foundation first discovered SCP-3153, there were concerns amongst the researchers that the anomalous creatures produce mind-affecting anomalies. After all, they could think of no other explanation for the deep bonds that have formed between several instances and their chosen humans. But a closer examination revealed no such mind-altering effects. As it turns out, the humans that have bonded with SCP-3153 instances see them as pets, just as a human might bond to any other pet. Yes, these pets are giant centipedes with slight shape-shifting capabilities, but companionship is companionship when push comes to shove. So far, according to Foundation records, 68% of human subjects have successfully bonded with their SCP-3153 instances, resulting in a 21% increase in overall productivity. This morale boost was so notable that one SCP Foundation researcher proposed the potential use of SCP-3153 for therapeutic purposes in the paper Humane Pests and Pestilent Humans, on the emergence of non-conventional friendships between Homo sapiens and anomalous arthropods.
Yeah.
I found it to be quite a persuasive piece of writing. I recommend giving it a read if you can find it. You may not have the security clearance, though. SCP-3153 is kept in an artificial containment habitat for centipedes at Site 64 in Forest Park, Portland, Oregon. The interior of the habitat is decorated to resemble a non-specific major metropolitan area, complete with visual and audio props meant to perpetuate the illusion and convince SCP-3153 instances that they are living in the outside world. This includes concrete, as well as speakers that play the ambient sounds of traffic in accordance with a standard rush hour schedule. In addition to the ordinary care required by non-anomalous centipedes, SCP-3153 instances are to be provided with weekly social interaction sessions with anywhere between 1 and 5 D-Class personnel. They may also receive social interaction sessions with employees of Goal 466, Wilson's Wildlife Solutions, that have Level 2 site-wide clearance. Sarah Gardner must always be given access, as she is bonded with SCP-3153-1. Anyone interested in participating in the social enrichment of SCP-3153 must first conduct and pass a psychological evaluation. This evaluation is intended to detect tendencies toward excessive emotional attachment, and candidates must be screened accordingly. Once someone has been approved, each socialization session may go on for a maximum of 1 hour and is to be monitored closely by researchers who will watch for the biological and behavioral changes to SCP-3153 that are sure to manifest. Once these alterations appear, they must be recorded and registered for posterity in order to allow for a fuller understanding of SCP-3153's genetics. Civilians who come into contact with instances of SCP-3153 in the wild must be given Class B amnestics, and the instances they met must be recovered by Goal 466 and brought into containment. At first glance, SCP-3153 might seem horrifying, disgusting, and repellent to behold, but we should all know better than to judge a book by its cover. At their core, these creatures seem to be gentle, friendly, loyal, and highly emotionally sensitive. All they want is to spend time with us. And why should they be denied that just because they look a bit different?
Yeah.
In my opinion, they aren't so different from dogs, with a whole lot more legs. Dogs have been man's best friend for quite some time. But perhaps we could make room in our hearts for some new friends too, even if they look a little bit scary. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-213.
Okay, that'll be it for now, awesome fans. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and comment down below. Have a nice day, awesome fans. Bye.